Good afternoon. I am so happy to be here. And welcome to today's panel on Talent for Tomorrow. The last panel was the perfect transition to this panel we're going to talk about today. I am honored to be with three unbelievably impressive panelists. To my left, we have Louisa Blaine, Head of Insurance for Human Capital at Aon. Then we have Fred Delmhorst, Chief Talent Officer at Chubb. And then at the end, we have Joan Lamb-Tennant, Chair of Equitable Holdings and AllianceBernstein Holdings, and also board member to the Institutes. These three individuals bring a diverse perspective. We're representing the broker, the carrier, the chair, and also a few of the panelists also come from academia as well, so we have great experience here. Today, we're going to discuss ensuring our industry has the talent necessary for the future. We just heard there's a war on talent, so how can we prepare? The IIS conducts a study called the Shin Research, which is generously funded by the Kyobo Life Insurance Company. And the study is going to serve as a backdrop for our conversation today. This year, it looked at over 10 years of projections of where we believe the industry will be in 10 years. We see traditional roles through this research declining, like claims and underwriting. We're seeing steady growth in sales. We've seen growth in sales roles for the past few years, and we expect that to be steady around 6 to 10% for the next 10 years. And we're seeing significant growth in roles such as data science and actuarial roles, growing up to almost 40%. We also talked to executives, and 80% of executives felt that the most game-changing thing for the next 10 years would be AI. They also said that the following concerns were also then followed by cyber, as well as resiliency. Together with our panelists, we're going to explore both the challenges and strategies. The last thing we noticed is that not only do we need the technical skills, but that we're seeing soft skills matter more than ever as well. Think about things like data fluency, critical thinking. We heard Anne-Catherine mention the need for judgment. We heard Sue Lim just talk about empathy. So these are all areas that we're going to dig into. So let's begin. Joan, I'm going to start with you. From a board and customer perspective, we're constantly hearing a clear tension with retirements accelerating, and yet the skills that we needed are increasing faster and faster. From your vantage point as a chair, what do you see as the most pressing talent challenges the insurance industry must address over the next decade to remain competitive?
All right. Thank you, Kate. Look, I think the first thing, and it actually starts with really acknowledging the massive transformational change that we face and the opportunity that lies within that change, of course. The change is driven by, as we've already talked today, AI, and with regard to talent, the human AI agent collaboration model. It could be driven by the state of the economy and the uncertainty. I like to call it slow burn uncertainty. It's not attributed to one event, like perhaps the financial crisis of 2008 or the pandemic, but instead just this continuous flow of events that are highly interconnected and complex. As a result of that, we'll have a structural change. It's not an anomaly uncertainty. It's going to become a structural force in how we do business. So first and foremost, recognize the transformation that faces us. But what's important is to understand that what we do is not going to change. It's important what we do. If anything, this environment of uncertainty actually increases the value of the product that we actually sell, the services that we actually deliver. It's human nature to want some continuity in your life, and as a result of that, having some confidence in your life, you make better choices for yourself, for your family, and in your livelihoods. So what we do will remain critically important, and some might say even more important. How we do it will, in fact, be transformed. And so I'd like to ask you just to reimagine for just a moment a different talent model. It's a talent model not when we just simply fulfill job descriptions, simply act like a matching service that says, here's the job description, who has experience in it, who has the capability of succeeding in it. But instead, really start to evaluate the capabilities that you need in your organization going forward. let me just suggest a few. The first one that I'd like to suggest is the intersection between human judgment, data intelligence, and moral responsibility. Now, I'm not asking any one of those independently. I'm suggesting the ability to act and develop talent that can find that intersection between the three. It's not driven just by intuitive experiences you might have. It actually requires a different level of thinking, critical thinking, multi-step reasoning, and yes, emotional intelligence as well. A second that I'd like to suggest is to actually think about your ability to connect with people, okay? Because we will differentiate ourselves based on the human element. By that I mean your ability to connect, to care, to empathize. And the third one is recognize that in this new world, and by the way, we're talking long-term here, so I realize there's some wood to chop before we get there. In this new world, information is going to be democratized, and in fact, some will even say that the marginal cost of information will be zero. So the only way we will be able to differentiate our companies, our products, our services, and delight our customers is really through that human interaction. So to kind of put it simply, just to wrap it up, I think it's a totally different talent model that we're looking at. And I'd like to just put a question on one of the other panels and turn it around. When we think about the people that we are hiring and how do we attract those people, maybe it's not what skills do we want from them, but what can we learn from them? As universities are transforming their education processes to actually start to create the awareness of emotional intelligence, creative thinking, agile leadership, then perhaps what it is a flatter organization where there's an exchange of knowledge between the analyst, what we more seasoned executives can learn from them, and the context that we might be able to share in the process.
Thanks, Joan. It's interesting that you talked about the connection with people and the care, because when we were at the institutes, we were looking for all of the places we could gain efficiencies. And so you look at your standard reporting and research and editing, and one of the places we started to look was customer success, and we felt that we could really automate that. And then we had to take a pause and go, but what sets us apart is how we deliver the customer service to our customers and that they expect that high touch. And for us, we felt that that was really a part of our value proposition. And so we took a step back and we went, that's not the place to go, because we feel that's where we can really lend a hand and stand out amongst competitors.
Yeah, that's a good validation.
Fred, we heard from Evan Greenberg yesterday a little bit about talent. What's the biggest talent risk you see Chubb facing over the next 5 years, and how are you working to mitigate it?
Yeah, so I mean, when I think about talent risks that I face every day, that we face every day, there's one that I feel like is clear and present right now, and there's one that's just around the corner, but equally important. The one that's clear and present and right here, right now, is simply having and keeping enough talent to get the work done that's on all of our plates today. Retention is obviously a challenge, and to be more specific, the group that is most critical, I believe, right here, right now, is what I would call mid-career. They're the glue, right? They're the glue between more senior leaders and senior management, and then our new hires, right? They're the ones that allow the virtuous apprentice cycle to thrive, and I think that is something that differentiates our sector still. You pull them out and suddenly everything changes, right? There's pressure going up, there's pressure going down, and that pay it forward mentality starts to break down. So not surprisingly, those are probably the most attractive talent for other companies. The second talent risk is a little bit further ahead, but not too far, and that is to be building the skills we need for the future today. And we've been talking a lot about that already. We know from the Shin research what those skills are: critical thinking, data analytics, AI fluency. But as an internal practitioner, the challenge is getting that message from the top to the bottom. So when I go and try to sell, building skills for the future to the president of any business who's looking 5 to 10 years ahead, they say, great, sounds good. Let's invest, let's do that training in person. Then I go to the division president, one level below, and they say, sounds good, can we do it virtually? But still, let's do it. And then ultimately you get to the regional manager or the frontline manager, and they say, looks good on paper, but I got to deliver gross written premium for the next quarter, so maybe not so much right now. So I think it's, someone was saying yesterday that when it comes to change and change leadership, it really needs to be top down. And so I think a message for everyone in this room is to help make sure that that forward-looking investment in skills is invested in today.
Great, thank you. Louisa, so we talked a little bit about the Shin research. So it projects 3 to 5% of overall industry increase by 2033. We talked about the significant declines. It estimates that data science will grow by 38% and actuarial positions will grow by 22%. How is your organization prepping for this uneven growth in roles across the workforce?
It's a great question, and just to start with, I guess I was curious to see such a fall in underwriting and claims, if I'm honest, because I thought, actually, given AI will take away some of those roles, and certainly augmentation provides some opportunity there. But I think given the aging demographic that faces the sector, and also the fact that we are looking at different types of emergent risk, whether that's on the climate, cyber, and so on, there's a lot that I think still needs the technical capabilities of our underwriting and claims teams as well. That said, I definitely agree that there will be an uptick in sort of the data scientists and the actuaries, and also sort of the change orchestrators going forward, and the new way of working that we need. And starting to see that new types of skills come into the sector is going to be absolutely paramount. So thinking about how some of the clients that we're working with are really starting to explore that, one of the big differences, I think now, is that balance of strategic workforce projection planning with both the business and the HR enabling that. It's moved away from, I think, when strategic workforce planning had sort of become a finance task, where people are sort of looking at spreadsheets and actually looking at the cost factor. And to the points earlier, it's much more about, well, what are those critical skills you need to make sure you're really able to deliver the ambitions? And that conversation to say, how do we integrate the people challenges and the talent against the ambition to grow our mid-market or the specialty business, and what that growth actually needs in terms of different types of skill set, allows that conversation that is business-led to then start exploring, well, what and where do we need those individuals, and how can we start to get those, and think a little bit more about the composition of that. I think it is really tough with the future-proofing coming in. We don't know all the answers, but future-proofing of that strategic workforce plan, thinking about what the AI impacts are, sensitivity analysis around that, alongside what actually can we get from the market, is going to be the other challenge. So we understand the demand. How do we get supply to level up with that in an environment where maybe people don't always want to come to insurance if they're a tech guru? And how do we make sure we're competitive? So I think what that has then triggered is more and more organizations actually looking internally and saying, well, how do we understand our workforce a bit better, who we currently have? Sure, we still want to attract that different type of talent in, but how can we start to think about the existing talent and really assess their potential and opportunities to move teams from maybe some classic underwriting into the terrorism team, or thinking about different markets as well. So that therefore means much more around that assessment, the market understanding about what the business needs alongside the people side of things. And with that assessment, what I'm starting to see also is that being reported up to board level as well, so that you are seeing it regularly on the dashboard. Where is the gap between what we're trying to do as a business and the ambition against where the workforce is, and how are we closing that on a sort of quarter-by-quarter basis? So boards, exec leadership, really seeing that the challenge is theirs to own, because it links so strongly, as you were saying, into the business projections and metrics that, frankly, business leaders are serving.
That's really helpful. When we think about upskilling and you look across the workforce, how are you assessing the individuals that you think are right to make those moves or move up?
It's interesting. So what we're seeing more and more are the lessons learned from other sectors coming through into how people are being assessed within our own industry. I think that starts right at the early careers, but we see the trends going right up pre-hire into executive level as well. And I think the balance of the technical skills, which are still always going to be important and still must be there, particularly given the complexity of risk coming, are now being balanced out with those behavioural elements. And we've touched on some of what that looks like, but I think collaboration, decision-making, predictive analytics and so on are the aspects we're starting to see more and more rigour come through in the assessments, as I say, pre-hire, but also into development programs for leadership and young talent, but also that more senior leader group as well that need those skills alongside that technical capability.
Absolutely. Well, I think with AI, what we've seen at our company and with a lot of our customers that we work with is to build on what you're saying. Communication is now key because they're now communicating with a bot. We need them to communicate with individuals, and also creativity to be able to discern what are you seeing with this AI chat bot and to discern what you think you should be implementing and think beyond that as well. How can you get creative? Because I think so many people are just going to ChatGPT or Claude to get the answer, but I think still that connection of working in a team and problem solving together is a real benefit as well.
Definitely, and particularly given what you said at the start around the different types of skills we need to solve the problem. There's not one individual that has all these answers. This really is about a new way of working, collaboration, bringing the futurists, the insurance guru and the change orchestrator, if you like, together to solve the problems as one.
Absolutely. So this is a great transition to planning for the workforce of tomorrow. So we have 5 generations that are currently in the workforce. And many in insurance, we heard this on the last panel, stumbled into insurance. They weren't going to choose it. They just landed there. For us, and we see a lot of our customers are having a very hard time recruiting Gen Z and younger professionals. It's a pressing issue. What strategies have been most effective for your firm in attracting diverse, tech-savvy candidates who may have not traditionally considered insurance?
I think you're right. I'm not speaking out of turn, and people have said it already. We're not necessarily the best. We don't always have the brand that might attract those key talents. I think what we are doing, particularly within Aon, is recognising, as was mentioned earlier, this isn't just a one-company problem. This is something where we need to partner really smartly with education institutions, maybe local partners who have better access to different social economic groups, for example, within schools, whether that is institutions or associations, particularly I think about the London market, there's some really impactful groups there that are really making a difference. So we've been working with a number of those, and within Aon we're trying to showcase, like others, that actually the brand and the perception of what insurance is about is not the reality. And doing that through experiential opportunities, grad programs for underwriters, actuarial have been around for a while, but how do we tap into different types of groups? And the social economic diversity, we've been focusing on some of our recent activities around work experience. It's been a nice complement for the apprenticeship models and the graduate models. So had, for example, in the UK recently, over 2,000 work experience folk join us. And given the feedback we heard earlier about virtual working, they wanted to be in person. So they went to our 8 different offices across the UK. And they had the opportunity over 3 days to really understand more about the sector, how some of the mathematics and analytical work they're doing in the classroom actually applied in innovation hubs, but also some of the real simple things like how do you prepare for an interview, how do you make sure you're equipped, and perhaps the parents haven't always had the opportunity to guide and advise in the way that some folks are fortunate to have. So we've sort of given the opportunities of some lessons to be learned as well. And that then means that people have seen in a very different way that they could be part of something. And interestingly, it's about 1/3 of our apprenticeship group are made up this year of people that have returned from that work experience program. And in total, probably about, I think it's 15% of Aon employees in the UK have had the opportunity to engage and work with these work experience folks as they've come through. So it's a real commitment on both sides. And, really where we can take this further is starting to look at the likes of some of the refugee programs that we're starting to run as well. So there's real opportunities for getting some very different skills and awareness into the market and also build that appreciation as well.
That's great. Joan, so the CEO, we can quickly see how a CEO transition can impact culture, investor confidence, a company, and it's also one of the most consequential talent decisions a board makes. How is your board, and in your role as chair of a couple boards, approaching succession planning today to ensure leadership continuity and readiness in an already complex and fast-changing environment?
It's a Very good question. I was given a Harvard Business Review article not too long ago, and it's the first time I actually saw succession, or the lack thereof succession, quantified. And so I actually ended up going back to the source root of their research because I wanted to see how credible it was. And to no surprise, this is Harvard Business Review. It was very credible. So I'm going to give you the numbers here for a minute. It actually identified that they looked at Fortune 500, S&P Fortune 500 companies, and they tracked them over time. And they concluded that the mismanagement of succession resulted in, on average, $1 trillion loss in market value per year. And they actually could put some interesting case studies around it. I mean, we all know the story of Microsoft, that really Nadella was not the first choice, but the third choice, and what a good choice now with hindsight. But then they went on a bit further in this article, and I thought the second part was really interesting, because when they went on further, they just said, look, there's conditions when internal candidates actually outperform external, and vice versa. And so internal candidates typically outperform external when the companies are actually in a growth trajectory and doing well, okay? And the reason for that is, one, more continuity in culture, and two, just less turnover. You know, in other words, you don't have rapid turnover in your appointments. Now, it's quite different if the company is struggling, if the company's in trouble, if it's a turnaround. In that case it was very clear that external candidates were truly more effective. So with that, I'd like to say that we make succession an ongoing, continuous dialogue. We don't wait till the message has then been delivered to the board, that there's a timeline upon us. It's an ongoing and continuous and quite robust dialogue amongst our board. And more importantly, what we do is we look into the organization, regardless of line responsibility, and we look for men and women with the attributes that we believe are necessary, the same attributes that I talked about earlier, the attributes that are necessary for the future of the company. And in many cases, what we look for is that they either have them or they have the ability to develop them. In the latter case, we really invest in coaches. I mean, we believe in coaches, both external and internal coaching. But we also do something that I think is very interesting. We don't necessarily do job switching per se, because these men and women have chosen an area of interest that they're passionate about. But we give stretch assignments that are outside their line of responsibility, that really requires them to think creatively, to build trust and a following outside their line of responsibility, and to kind of create what I like to say is an enterprise vision, because you don't learn that if you're responsible within a line. So at the end, when the day comes and we are having to move a succession plan forward, we do believe it's our fiduciary responsibility to seek the support of professionals, and we will and intend to hire professionals. But for what purpose? I think the purpose will be defined in this way. One is we want to make sure that we're properly defining the attributes. One is we value search firms' abilities to evaluate candidates against the attributes. And yes, we welcome and we value their ability to bring external candidates alongside of our internal candidates. With that, though, you have to think about how you structure these engagements. You've got to structure the engagement so that there's no bias, either conscious or unconscious, that would either favor or not favor, disadvantage internal candidates. And last of all, when the time comes, our companies are dynamic, they're growing, their needs change, and so will the profile, the precise profile of the leader that we want at that moment in time.
Joe, what's the percentage that you hire somebody that's an internal candidate or an external candidate?
The percentage?
Yep.
For CEO?
Yep, for a CEO.
Well, see, I won't be able to give you the number because just to give you the story, as many in this room know, that Equitable, why it's more than 160-year-old institution. It was bought by AXA in the 1990s, and then it was the largest spin-off in the US markets, or I should say the largest IPO in the US markets in 2018. So we have one CEO, okay? And Mark was with AXA. He led AXA Japan, and he came to rebuild the franchise in the US after the financial crisis. And he is our current CEO. So we have one,
good.
but I will tell you we are actively involved in the identification of succession candidates when and if that day comes.
Well, I'm glad he's been around for quite many years and it worked out.
Yeah.
Louisa, let's talk about Gen Z and millennials again. What are you hearing most often from them about what is going to have them stay and keep them engaged at a company?
I think the points that were made earlier about purpose are really significant. And I think part of what I was describing before was also with a wrapper around it to make sure people really understand sort of the brave decisions that we're really helping others make in the risks that we're involved with. Interestingly, though, in addition to that, we recently did a global employee sentiment study which looked at the 5 different generations in the workforce, and of the top 4 or 5 benefits that they're really valuing each one of those groups. What came through for the Gen Z generation particularly was looking at sort of medical and health coverage, so their well-being was really considered to be very important, and seeing that slightly differently from maybe what others different generations might experience, but very much sort of their stability, well-being, and so on. I think that was considered paramount. Their appetite to make sure they can really embrace work-life balance, or what I'm hearing termed now work-life harmony, because that's a real part that's important for them. Paid time off also goes alongside that. So it really is about this life experience. And then perhaps fourthly, and again, I don't think at odds with what we've just said, but career development. So those opportunities to really sort of be in role and navigate some exciting, interesting opportunities. Now, I think many of us in the room will have also recognised the career development pathways are starting to emerge with AI coming in. Many of the roles that would typically have been done by that group are starting to change. But typically those are the sort of 4 that came out as really, really key for us. Really key for that group in this study. I guess the other thing I would invite us to do, though, is to really look at those other generations in the workforce and what are the expectations around those groups as well. We're seeing a lot more about personalisation of the employee value proposition, and how do you use the data smartly that you've got to really make sure that everybody is feeling valued as a member of the workforce, that we can attract different people in with different requirements, and actually perhaps organisations thinking more about understanding, sure, what the employees are looking for or the candidates you're trying to attract, alongside what is it we're offering or can offer as an organisation, but also what do we want to stand for? What do we want to be known for in the market? And a number of the conversations we're having on this topic at the moment around value proposition are really about, well, how do we show up? What do we want to do to differentiate, not just in our sector, but actually outside the sector to get those best candidates in? So who do you want to be, what do you want to be standing out for, and who do you want to be standing out to attract that talent?
That's great. I mean, I have seen even what we see with all of our customers, so we touch about 1 million students a year at the institutes. We are seeing them. It really once was pay and promotion, and like you said, it's career pathways, it's well-being. It's for a purpose, which is perfectly aligned to insurance because it's such a noble profession. So it's interesting. We're completely aligned with what you're seeing as well. Fred, so we're already seeing underwriting working alongside AI co-pilots, claims using AI to summarize reports, actuaries using synthetic data. AI is already changing jobs. With nearly 80% of industry leaders expecting that AI and automation will be the most significant impact in the next decade, how are you envisioning the workforce of the future, both in terms of roles and required skills?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So I think it's going to certainly impact roles. It's going to impact skills. If we take skills first, skills-based learning is a trend in my world. It's like the AI for HR. Lots of promise. So, the first step in deploying a skills-based approach to learning in any organization is to make sure you know what those skills are. So not too long ago, I was bringing our skill set for underwriters not to Evan, but to a very similarly seasoned executive at Chubb. And of course, on slide 1, I had all of the very traditional technical skills, selection of risk, pricing, you know the set there. And then I had on slide 2, typically the skills I need to kind of encourage attention for: relationship building, influence, problem solving, right? More interpersonal skills. And so I share the 2 slides with this very senior leader. And at the end, he says, "Looks great. I think you have the right skills. I just have one piece of feedback." And I'm sitting there waiting for it. And he goes, "I think you have them in the wrong order." And I nearly fell over, right? But the point was that many of the technical skills are probably going to be the ones more inclined to automation first, right? Whereas what will become the differentiating set are the more interpersonal ones. And so I think that's really interesting when you think about some of the comments in earlier panels around how the business of risk is the business of trust. And so, I suppose my observation based on that commentary is that humans still trust humans first, and perhaps that will change at some point. But I think until then, there could be a really differential focus and emphasis on those interpersonal skills. As far as roles, there is also a lot of speculation about how AI will disrupt, especially early career roles. I heard a lot of optimism so far. I think that's an attribute of leaders, optimism. But I'm equally optimistic that AI, at least initially, will help make those entry-level roles not wiped out, but more interesting, to lift them up out of the mundane. My entry-level job was very mundane. I wouldn't have minded a little bit of AI support. So I'm hopeful that it won't, kind of erase entry-level roles, but really help to elevate them instead.
Great. So Louisa, Fred was just mentioning the soft skills. Think about empathy, communication, and leadership. They're critical for managers, but less investable for non-managers. How do you balance building both those hard and soft skills at a company?
I think the challenge of mindset that we've talked about and different ways of working is probably most obvious in an area like that, actually, because I don't think it is just the leadership roles or management roles that would be needing to think about behaviours. For me, that list you just given and we've talked about is really now needs to be embedded into every skill set, every role within the organisation. There needs to be that understanding of how different groups come together quickly, what that means, the judgment that's associated, decision making, etc. All of the behavioural attributes we've talked about. And it's not just certain pockets that it might have been in the past. I think in order to really assess that, you almost need to take the behavioural lens across the whole of the employee life cycle. So whether that's looking at how do you bring those right people in through the assessments I touched on and pre-hire activity around behavioural validation and assessment and sort of exploration, right through to, well, how do you reward the right aspects? How do you think really smartly about what performance looks like for a team performance incentive, as well as the individual, and where that balance really sits is going to be important as well. And then right through to, well, how do you think about development, mobility options, and again, really keeping it within the culture of the organisation, that those key behaviours, and it'll probably just be 2 or 3 key ones for your organisations that are going to stand out in the way that we talked about, that they're going to be the ones that we major on and really embed smartly, because you don't need that shopping list of behaviours. It's great to understand what it needs to look like, but from that you need to really pick what are the areas of focus that you're going to have as a business as well. And then, as I say, make sure you're embedding that throughout the life cycle.
Great. It's interesting, at the institutes we do a lot of technical training, but because technical is now only a part of the puzzle, we started integrating soft skills training and leveraging AI and our knowledge content. We're able to create all of these simulations so that individuals, and we know that the younger generation likes this type of learning, so we created these simulations that you can go in, and if you're an underwriter talking to a broker, you can change the temperament of a broker to angry or anxious, not that a broker would ever be like that, and you can pick the line of business, and this individual can go operate in a real world scenario, actually having a conversation, and they're testing both their technical skills and their communication and their empathy and their customer service. So I really can see the training evolving that way as well, because that's an area we're playing in.
And what I love of what you just said is it's not just feeling like the sort of nebulous, what's the behaviour? It really brings the behaviour into the day job, which is where it's really going to explain and expose itself in this new world.
Absolutely, and in a safe environment, right, as well. Joan, what leadership traits and capabilities are boards increasingly prioritizing in the next generation executives, particularly in light of this technological disruption?
Well, I particularly enjoyed your story. And I'll tag along a little bit on this. I mean, this is a trust business. I mean, this is what we're about. We make promises that we must deliver on, and sometimes those promises, extend for generations. So trust is core. It does question kind of your leadership style. And so in a command and control leadership style, it can be effective, but it tends not to drive trust. I mean, it kind of starts at the top. It takes a lot of courage to trust in your executive team and your direct reports, right? So I wanted to emphasize the importance of trust running through the complete company, from the board to the CEO to the executive team, all the way down to the men and women that face our customers. So we've talked a lot about trust, but I just want to bring two more to the table that I don't think we've really emphasized. And, it's going to begin with, of course, you've got to be credible. I mean, this is a technical business. You got to learn the business. You got to know the technical aspects of the business, how it's priced, how it's underwritten, how it's distributed, how capital is being allocated. But in addition to that, it's really important that you have integrity. And by that, I mean we look for leaders that are grounded in purpose, but also who are consistent in their behavior, that every day and every way they live those values. And the second thing that I don't think we've really talked about thus far is humility. In other words, the recognition that it's your role as a leader to inspire and to advocate. Nothing gets done without your trust in those around you to ultimately deliver to the front-end client. So when I think about inspiring, I think, well, in a way, that allows those you interact with to at least dream a bit of what could be possible. And to advocate, you open the doors for that possibility to become a reality. And that's where innovation comes from. That's where client awareness comes from. So I'm going to just summarize this in a minute, and it's going to sound a little bit like contradictions, but I'm looking for a leader who can thread this needle. It's a leader that's decisive, that's able to make decisions, but yet adaptable. A leader that is credible, but also recognizes the importance of emotional intelligence. And a leader that's accountable, but yet willing to be humble. So if you take those apart, put them side by side, they look like total contradictions, but they're not. It's finding when to lean to the right and left and how to thread that needle.
Thank you, Joan. And as you had mentioned, it kind of goes all the way down to the bottom. It's from the CEO all the way down. So Fred, from a succession planning standpoint, how are you preparing the next generation of leaders?
Well, I'll add another attribute to Joan's list that I think comes naturally to our sector, which is diligence. We're very diligent with our policies, and we can be equally diligent with our talent, right? And I think effective succession, it looks like taking the time to be as diligent several levels down the organization about making sure a policy is proper as to a talent decision. I came from another sector, I'll protect the innocent, but at that company, if I were to sit down with the CEO and say, what's your point of view about this emerging high potential who is maybe 2 levels down from you, not even 3, I would often be met with a flat stare and a question, who is that? I've never met them. Whereas when I see Evan and John and Juan Luis and the most senior leaders in our organization go into the field, they are meeting with those people multiple levels down. They're developing their own personal points of view about each and every one, so that when we get to the succession planning process, it takes about 5 seconds for them to propose the next role or the next assignment that will prepare them to be leaders. But it's really about applying that value that comes naturally to many of us from the business to the talent.
That's wonderful. One last question, Joan, for you, and then just a question for everybody. I feel like you can't have a talent conversation without talking about culture. Yeah. So I started my career in HR. That was a role of human resources, was to focus on culture. It was a metric. Decades later, culture is increasingly recognized as a strategic asset. How do you view the board's role in shaping, monitoring, and sustaining a culture that drives performance, retention, and purpose?
Yeah, when I think about corporations just in general, it's important for them to have a why, a what, and a how. And the why, is your purpose, right? It actually becomes your anchor in decision making. Your what becomes your strategy, it becomes your compass. But your how is your people. And where does culture fit into this? It's the thread that brings them all together, that brings an end-to-end process in what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. So it's critically important. And as a board, we can look at metrics, because we think about culture in every one of the responsibilities that we have. Like, are we making decisions and reinforcing policy that is aligned with this culture that drives our whole purpose to our strategy and to our execution? And when we think about it, sure, we have metrics. You have retention analysis, you have net promoter scores, you have employee engagements, but governance has actually changed. We have a responsibility in the boardroom, but we are available to the management team and to the CEO, appropriately so. Remember, we're governance and not with operating responsibilities. And I have the good fortune when I get a call, Mark asks me to participate in a town hall, or he asked me to attend an employee event that happens to be celebratory in one of our offsite offices. Because it's really experiencing the culture is when you're getting it right. It's not so obvious from the KPIs.
I completely agree with you. I know that anytime we have representation at our company and our board is represented there, it really is a reflection of our culture. And what I have found is that the best boards do represent the culture, that the board is very aligned with the company and how they act and the words that they say, their belief system. I feel, in my personal opinion, that they're the most successful boards and companies, the ones where there's that cultural alignment.
It's good to know.
Okay, last question for each of you. I'll start with you, Louisa. Looking ahead, what do you see ahead of us for the industry?
Well, we've just published our global risk management survey. We do this every couple of years, and that highlights, perhaps unsurprisingly, big risks around cyber, political unrest, and climate, and so on, all of which are going to have a tremendous pressure, if you like, placing on the workforce as we look to solve the challenges associated with each of those areas. I think it's most important that we really do get that integration between the business strategy and the people side of things to really make sure that you can deliver the business strategy around each of those key areas and the emergent risk types that we need to address. In order to be able to do that, we really need to think about, well, what does that strategy look like to attract and retain that key talent? And I would suggest, to your point about the diligence, but also, in a business that manages risks and data so well, we apply that rigor through our people data as well in that same way. So really exploring, even if it's not complete, and it probably won't be, what's the people data telling us to inform those decisions with confidence, and then really enhance and strengthen those choices we're making will really be the thing we need to focus on.
Great. Fred?
Look, I think it's a time of huge uncertainty, significant change, and that obviously can be threatening, but it also can be really inspiring. And it's when leaders and hopefully people who develop leaders are most essential, right? So, we need entrepreneurs, we need innovation, we need people who can adopt new technologies, and of course we need talent who can bring all of that together. There's a lot of talk about the different value set in the next generation of the workforce, but I know that One of them is helping people, and I think that's a fundamentally well-aligned value to our sector, so I remain optimistic.
Great. And Joan?
Oh, I'm quite optimistic, to tell you the truth, because I see the future being one where technology will amplify our capabilities. So everything that we do will be valuable because things that can be done by technology will be. But in addition to that, it's a time where the moral intelligence will be rooted in the individual, in the human. So I see a future where you're going to be valued, not just for your knowledge and your capabilities, but for your humanness, your ability to care, to connect, and to innovate. That's a pretty exciting industry to be in.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for participating in our panel, and thank you to our 3 wonderful panelists. I learned so much. I hope everyone else did, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.